Okay, go ahead.
Perek Yud Beit, chapter 12, page 155. Kima Kima v'chipazon. Gula Rishona v'Gula Achrona, the first redemption and the last redemption, little by little and with haste, with hurry. In connection to the future redemption, the Navi Yeshayahu, chapter 52, brings verses 7 through 12. Manavu ala harim raglei mevaser. How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of the mevaser is someone giving news. Besorot tovot is good news. Mevaser is the one giving news. Herald, perhaps. Mashmiya shalom, he is announcing peace. Mevaser tov, giving good news. Mashmiya Yeshua, making heard the salvation. Omer Letzion Malach Elokayich. He says to Zion, your king rules. Kol Tzofayich Nasu Kol. The voice of the watchmen raise their voices. Yachdav Yiranenu, together they sing. Ki ayin ba'ayin yiru b'shuv Hashem Tzion. Because eye to eye they will see when God returns to Zion. Pitzchu v'ranenu yachdav. They break out in song together. Charvot Yerushalayim, about the destruction of Jerusalem. Ki nacham Hashem amo ga'al Yerushalayim, because God has had compassion on His nation and redeems Jerusalem. Hashaf Hashem et Zroa Kodsho. God opens, draws His holy arm. Leinei kol hagoyim, before all the nations. Ru'u kol afsei eretz et Yeshuat Elokeinu. And all the nations of the world see the salvation of our God. Suru suru, turn, Ze'u misham tamei, let the impure go out. Al tigu, do not touch. Ze'u mitochachem havru nosei klei Hashem. Come out from it and carry the vessels of God. Ki lo b'chipazon titzeu, because it is not with speed, with haste that you will leave. Ubenusa, and with running. Lo telechem, you will not go. Ki halach lifneihem Hashem, because God will walk before you. Umaspechem Elokei Yisrael, and the God of Israel will gather you up. In the words of the Navi, he's stressing that the final redemption is not quick or speedily, which are words that are used referring to the first redemption from Egypt. And based upon these psukim, Rabbi Chia Hagadol said when he stood before the dawn, the Yerushalmi that we've looked at the very beginning of this series, Kachi Gulatan Shel Yisrael, thus is the redemption of Israel, meaning looking at the light of dawn beginning. Betchila Kima Kima, at the beginning it's a little bit of time. Kol mash hi holeches, hi rabava holeches. As much as it grows, it continues to grow more. So Rabbi Chia Rabbah is saying that this is a slow process until it's completed. In terms of the going out of Egypt, HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded Moshe to prepare the Korban Pesach, and he said that the Korban Pesach had to be eaten quickly, with haste, as we see in Shemot Yud Beit Pasuk Yud Aleph. V'kacha tachlu oto, this is the way you will eat it. Motnechem chagurim alechem b'reglechem, your belts on, your shoes on your feet. Umiklechem biyadechem, your staff in your hand. Ve'achaltem oto b'chipazon, you will eat it quickly. Pesach hu l'Hashem, it is a paschal sacrifice to God. Also in Devarim, where Moshe Rabbeinu goes over and explains again the halachot of Korban Pesach for all generations, he stresses the aspect of speed. This is Devarim Perek Tet Zayin, chapter 16, verses 1 through 3. Shemur et Chodesh Ha'aviv, keep the month of the spring. Ve'asita Pasach LaHashem Elokecha, you will make it a Passover to the Lord your God. Ki b'chodesh Aviv hotziacha Hashem Elokecha miMitzrayim laila, because it was in the month of the spring that the Lord your God took you out of Egypt at night. V'zavachta Pesach LaHashem Elokecha tzon u'bakar b'makom asher yivchar Hashem l'sheken shmo sham, and you will slaughter the paschal sacrifice to the Lord your God, flocks and cattle in the place that the Lord your God chose to dwell there. Lo tochlu alav chametz, shivat yamim tochlu alav matzot. You will not eat chametz. For 7 days you will eat matzot. Lechem oni, the bread of affliction. Ki b'chipazon yitzat mi'eretz Mitzrayim, because you hastily left the land of Egypt. Lizman tizkor et yom tzeitcha mi'eretz Mitzrayim kol yimei chayecha, so that you can remember the going out of Egypt all the days of your life. These psukim, both the ones in Shemot and the ones in Devarim, very clearly say that the haste, the speed, the pressure which the Jews were under accompanied the process of the first redemption. And according to, in juxtaposition to this, is the lack of haste when it's talking about the final redemption. It is recognizable that the prophet, when he's referring to the final redemption, he uses expressions that are the exact opposite of haste. In the Mechilta of Rabbi Yishmael, Parshat Bo, when it talks about the Korban Pesach, Parshat 7, the Tanaim discuss the relationship between haste in the pasuk, ve'achaltem oto b'chipazon, you will eat it quickly, and with the haste that existed in Egypt, with the expulsion of the Jews from Egypt. It's interesting, normally when we talk about the expulsion of the Jews, we're talking about places like Spain and so on, where it was not a good thing. Here it's actually a good thing to be expelled from Egypt. Or is it simply that it was quickly that Israel had to leave Egypt? Or was it the divine presence that forced them to leave? What was the cause of the chipazon? Ve'achaltem oto b'chipazon, the Mechilta starts, so verse 5. Zei chipazon Mitzrayim, this is the haste of Egypt. Ata omer ken, or enu ele chipazon Yisrael, or maybe it's the Jews are in haste. Teshu omer, when it says, the chol b'nei Yisrael lo yechrav kelev l'shono, and among Israel, no dog barked his tongue. No dog made any sound. Hari chipazon Yisrael amor. It's talking about this, the haste of Israel. Hama ani mekayim ve'achaltem oto b'chipazon. How do I fulfill the mitzvah that I ate it with chipazon? Zei chipazon Mitzrayim. This is the haste of Egypt. So Israel wasn't in haste, but Egypt was. How do these psukim say, l'chol b'nei Yisrael lo yechratz kelev l'shono, tell us that B'nai Yisrael was not in haste? There is a commentary in the Mechilta called Zeh Yenachemenu that writes as follows: Tekeven da'amra Torah shehaya zeh chidush shelo haya kelev choretz l'shono. Since the Torah is telling us that it's a wonder that no dog barked, Shema mina sheyu holchim b'mihirot b'chipazon. You see that they were going quickly. V'derech halavim linboach achar haholech b'chipazon. When dogs see people rushing around, they get excited and they bark. Nonetheless, even though people were running around in haste, the dogs were quiet. But if they were going slowly, then it wouldn't be a wonder, wouldn't be something special to tell us that the dogs were barking. When people are just walking around their houses and preparing for a trip in 3 days, the dogs don't bark. Because that's not the way of the dogs. Therefore, we're talking about the speed, the haste of Israel. Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha Omer, Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha says, you will eat it with haste. Zei chipazon Yisrael. This is the haste of Israel. Ata Omer ken, Or Einu Ele Chipazon Mitzrayim. Are you telling me this, or maybe it's only the haste of Egypt? Kashu Omer Ki Garshu Mitzrayim. When it says they were chased out of Egypt, Har Chipazon Mitzrayim Amor. Then it's talking about that the Egyptians were in a rush. Umat Lomar B'Chipazon. And so when our pasuk is saying with haste, say Chipazon Yisrael. This is the haste of Israel. Abba Chanan Mishum Rabbi Lezer Omer. Say Chipazon Shechina. Rabbi Chanan, the son of Rabbi Lezer, said this is the haste of the divine presence. Afal Pishein Rai Ladaber Zecher Ladaber. Even though there's no proof to it, there's a hint to it. Kol Dodi Hineze Ba Medaleg Al Harim Mikapei Tzalek Va'od. The voice of my beloved, behold, it is coming, it is jumping on the mountains and skipping on the hills. Pasuk from Shir Hashirim. The Omer Hineze Omed Achar Kotleinu, and it says, behold, he is hiding behind our wall. Yachol Afatid Lavo Yeh B'Chipazon. Maybe in the future to come it will also be quick. Talmud Lomar, so the pasuk says, Ki lo b'chipazon teitzeu. It is not with speed and quickness that you will leave. U'b'menusa lo telechon. And with running you will not go. Ki holech lifneihem Hashem. Because God goes before you. When it's talking about sheb'chipazon halchu misham mipnei hasimcha shazaku legeula, they went out quickly because of the rejoicing of the redemption. And this is showing that they were happy in their redemption. That is also from the Seyyid Nachamenu on the Mechilta. So it could be in the future it would also be quickly. Therefore, the Mechilta comes at the end to stress that it's not that way. So we see, looking at the Mechilta, there are three opinions, differing opinions, about to whom the pasuk refers when it says V'chalta moto b'chipazon. Is it Israel, is it Egypt, or is it the Shechina, the divine presence? Or was it all of them were needed to get this done quickly? The Mechilta stresses at the end that the final redemption will not be this way. The situation of the first and last redemptions are different, and that the pasuk from the Navi says, as we mentioned earlier, Ki b'lo b'chipazon tetzeu v'menusat lo telechon. It is not with haste you will leave, and you will not run when you go. Why is there this difference? What is special about the first redemption that it had to be quick? And on the other hand, what's the difference with the final redemption that cannot be quick? The Maharal discusses this in several places, the reason for the differences between the first and the last redemption. The first reason that the Maharal brings in Gvurot Hashem, Perek Lamed Hey, chapter 35, that the first redemption was unnatural in nature. It was above nature. It was supernatural. And therefore, it didn't have to go by stages, but it could happen quickly. So Maharal writes in source 6, and so the nature of the redemption is as follows. The dough of our forefathers did not have time to rise. We see from this that the entire way of the redemption did not take time. Right? We know by tradition that dough begins to raise after 18 minutes. And because Israel went out in the level of divine sanctity that is not related to time. They went out through signs and wonders. And so this first redemption is something that is not related to an occurrence over time. The entire redemption from Egypt is miraculous in a supernatural way. And therefore it's quick, because if something is miraculous, it by nature does not take time. Time is an expression of nature. Generally in nature there aren't jumps. You don't look at a plant and 1 minute it's 3 feet tall and the next minute it's 30 feet tall, it's 3 feet tall. And then if you would try and measure the difference, you wouldn't be able to measure the difference in its growth over time. Only if you come back after a period of time can you see that there's been a change. But because Israel was going out of Egypt in the divine way, because it was all above nature, therefore there was no time and there was no process that occurred. There were jumps. Just like the water turning into blood. It's instant. It's like turning on a light switch. And the Maharal writes farther in chapter 51, source 7, Ki b'chipazon yatzu miMitzrayim, because with haste he went out of Egypt, Kima shayu yotzim b'chipazon bli hemshech zman, that they went out in haste without it being a process that took time. Morei shiatzu b'madrega umala elyona. We see that they went out in the highest level. Ve'apal ba misham nase blizman, and the deeds that occurred there were without time. Lo kamot dvarim hatzivim, not like natural things. Shekol pulatan behemshech zman, that all of their actions occur over time. Aval kan hi gulatam shelo b'teva, but here is their redemption without nature. Therefore it is hastily without a process of time. So we see again that the fact that the first redemption was hasty is pointing out to us that this is divine. It's not natural. And whereas a natural process is something that requires time and process around it. But the fact that there was no time involved, or essentially no time involved, in going out of Egypt, Bnei Israel were therefore on the highest divine level. And that's why their redemption at that point could occur without a process. The second reason that the Maharal brings is that this redemption was a temporary redemption. It was only for a limited period of time, as opposed to the future redemption, which will be eternal. In this week's Haftorah, right, it says it was 480 years after Bnei Israel left Egypt that the temple was built. First temple stand, I believe, 420 years, which means you're talking about a period of redemption lasting 900 years. That's a temporary period of time. It's measurable. It's not infinite. So the Maharal, in the second explanation, is Netzach Yisrael, Perek Mem Zayin, source 8. Ubi'ir inyan zeh, and the explanation of this thing, Ki mipnei she'agula rishona lo hayta gula nitzchit, because the first redemption was not eternal. Shari al hayu nigalim rak l'shah, because they were only redeemed for a limited period of time. V'kach haya inyan hagula, and this was the nature of their redemption. Gam ken dome la'or habarak, it is similar to the light of lightning. Shenira b'rakia l'shah umiyad over. It appears in the sky for a second, and then it's past. V'lo hayta hagula rishona davar tamidi kayam, and the first redemption was not something that would last forever. Lefichach haya yitziatam b'chipazon, therefore they left quickly. The gamken, they also left quickly. Ki kol davar she'enu kayam tamidi hu over b'mihirut l'sha. Anything that will not last for a long time, it passes. Aval geula achrona, but the final redemption, she geula nitzchit ubli shinui klal, rak tamid kayam. But the final redemption, that will be an eternal redemption without any change, and it will stand forever. Lekach lo ye davar ze b'chipazon. Therefore, it will not be quickly. So, the Maharal is saying that the sign, so to speak, that something will pass is the fact that it occurs quickly. And therefore, the first redemption, which was going to pass, it was something that occurred quickly. However, the redemption that will last eternally, it must be a process that will take a significant amount of time in order to be fulfilled, in order to be finished. Next section of this chapter, Gulat Nefesh v'Gulat Guf, the redemption of the soul and the redemption of the body. When we first look, there appears to be a contradiction in the words of the Maharal in different places. In Gevurat Hashem, he talks about the first redemption as at the highest level, supernatural in nature, and therefore it occurs quickly. But Netzach Yisrael, he describes the first redemption as something that is temporary, that therefore it occurs quickly and it ends after a period of time. If it's of the highest level, one would think that it should last. Why is that which is at the highest level temporary and that which is at a lower level permanent? Harav Harlap, which is source 3 here, which really should be source 1 for this section, writes as follows: Marinei Hashua Perak Vav Amud Kaf Aleph. Ubegula Ha'atida, and in the future redemption, Yigaldu Hanefesh Ve'aguf Gam Yachad. We will redeem both the soul and the body together. Hen derech meis, hen derech teva. Some by the way of miracle, and some in the natural way. Hen la'at le'at, v'hen b'chipazon. Some of them slowly, and some of them quickly. Hanefesh b'neisu b'chipazon. The soul will be redeemed by miracle and quickly. Ve'aguf, and the body, b'teva v'la'at le'at. It will be a natural process and occur slowly. I should stress that this was written before the establishment of the State of Israel. Rav Harlap was the Rosh Yeshiva of Merkaz Harav from Rav Kook's passing until the early 50s when he passed away. But Ma'anei Yeshua was written significantly before the establishment of the State of Israel. Ulefish b'Mitzrayim haya be'ikar shichrur hanefesh. And because in Egypt the principal redemption was the freedom of the soul, therefore the redemption was quick. Because, quoting Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 3, with haste you went out of Egypt. And from the body, they remained in the mentality of exile. They were afraid of everything. They desired to return to their state in exile. Nitnu rosh v'neshuva mitzrayma. They say in Bamidbar, chapter 14, verse 4, let us appoint a head and we'll go back to Egypt. We'd rather be slaves in Egypt than free people. Lo ken hagula hatida. Not so the future redemption. Hagula achrona she'ein acharecha galut. The final redemption that will not have any exile after it. Shaz yigal gam haguf. Then also the body will be redeemed. Therefore it will be a process that goes little by little. Kima Kima, slowly, slowly. It is not with haste that you will go out, and you will not run when you go. Because God goes before you, and the God of Israel will gather you. Yeshayav Yud Beit, Isaiah 52:12. Amnam, but kol zehu rak begulat haguf. All of this is only with the redemption of the body. Aval ge'ulat nefesh tiyeh nes la'atid b'chibazon. But the redemption of the soul also in the future will be hastily. Upitom yavo el heichalo ha'adon. And suddenly you will come to the palace of the Lord. Asher atem mevakshim, that you are asking for it. Umalach habrit asher itam chafetzim, and with the angel of the covenant that you desire. So Rav Harlap is distinguishing between redemption of the body and redemption of the soul. In Egypt, where the soul was redeemed, was the principal redemption. Therefore, it is hastily. But in the future redemption, which is going to be both a physical and spiritual redemption, there are going to be two aspects to it. There is going to be a slow and a speedy aspect. The redemption of the body has to be slow, and the redemption of the soul, which will come at the end of the redemption of the body, that will be speedy. So we can detect this when we think about students. It is often true, we see this very, very regularly, that the Rosh Yeshiva comes and he talks, gives a very important shiur about how important it is to be on time to minyan, and and he talks about the importance of minyan and other it can be any type of concept that elevates the person, and the people feel this great elevation. But it doesn't last. Next morning at minyan, everyone's there on time. The following morning, a few people are late. Within a few days, it's returned to normal. This is the nature of a spiritual change. That if there's no miracle to it, it takes a lot of work. In our world, we see how our lives live. It comes to expression in this way. We have 248 limbs, 365 sinews that have to be, each one has to be filled in its own way with its own idealism. The body has to be the vessel that reveals what's in the soul. It is the dwelling place for the revelation of the soul's power and desires, to its elevation or degradation. And this type of change is something that requires an internal work over time for the body to be developed in such a way that it can then accept the spiritual lofty heights. In Egypt, where the soul was redeemed, the body, in juxtaposition to it, stayed in its normal mentality of exile. Therefore, we find with the Dor HaMidbar that they said, the generation of the desert, Nitna Rosh v'Neshuva Mitzrayma, give us a leader and we'll go back to Egypt. They wanted to return to the slavery of Egypt. There is no question that this is wondrous. We can't really understand why people who had seen miracles would want to return to slavery in Egypt. But we see that even though we're told that at the Yam Suf, right, that even a maidservant was elevated to a higher spiritual level than Yecheskel, the Navi. So how is it possible? So the Ibn Ezra explains when he's dealing with the following pasuk. For source 4, Shemot Perek Yud Bey, Yud Dalet pasuk Yud, Exodus 14:10. Uparo hikriv, and Paro grew near. V'yisu b'nei Yisrael et einehem, B'nai Mitzrayim nosei achreihem. And B'nai Yisrael raised their eyes, and they saw Egypt was traveling after them. V'yiru me'od, they were very afraid. V'yitzaku B'nai Yisrael el Hashem. And B'nai Yisrael called to God. So the Ibn Ezra says on this, source 3, Yesh li tmoa, one could wonder, Eich yira machanei gadol shel 600,000 ish me'arod v'machareihem. How will a huge camp of 600,000 men be afraid of people chasing after them? Lama lo yilachamu al nafsham ve'al b'neihem. Why did they not prepare to make war for their lives and for their children? Hatshuva, the answer, the Ibn Ezra says, is Ki Mitzrayim hayu adunim liYisrael. The Egyptians were the masters of Israel. V'zei hador hayotzei miMitzrayim lamad min Rav lispol ol Mitzrayim v'nafsho shvela. And this generation that went out of Egypt learned from its youth to suffer the yoke of Egypt and have a lowly soul. Yuchal ata lehilachem im Adonav. And how is it possible now for them to make war against their lords? After 210 years of slavery, affliction, it leaves a deep mental mark upon the generation, upon each individual. So much so that even after they're freed, they do not see themselves as free. They still see the Egyptians as their lords, as their masters, so that they're incapable of standing up against them. As opposed to this, in the future generation, when both the body and the soul are going to be redeemed, Ki melah haaretz de'ah et Hashem, as Yeshayahu says, because the world will be filled with the knowledge of God, K'mayim mechasim, like water that covers the oceans. Isaiah 11:9. Lo rak hashamayim yu meleim dat et Hashem. It is not only the heavens that will be filled with the knowledge of God, elagam haaretz, but also the land will be filled this way. And from the point of the land, the nature of it changes as it's filled with the knowledge of God. And this creates the ultimate goal of the final redemption, the ideal, the elevated, that will come into existence physically, nationally, in terms of the land, and therefore it requires a long process so that the body can reach that level. And the final redemption is only going to be complete when it has been fulfilled, Kima Kima, step by step. Rav Kook writes in one of his letters, Lo chalishut koachu zeh. It is not a weakness of strength. Mash yeshuatam shel Yisrael hi Kima Kima. That the salvation of Israel is step by step, little by little. Ki im gevurot gevurot. It is the pinnacle. It is the apex of power. Riyut Elyona, Makefet Kol Hamamleya et Kol. That phrase is very difficult to translate. It is the ultimate power that fills up everything. Just 1 second. All right, we are halfway done with this chapter, and we will stop here. Next week we will discuss about the redemption from Egypt and the final redemption.